All right, I am back with you and got breaking news. This can't wait for my new format. So here it comes. Thoughts from Flyover Country. Hey, I'm back. Um, wow, this is a big one. Roe versus Wade was overturned today. And quite frankly, I always thought there was a touch of insanity in the pro abortion movement, looking at the history of Planned Parenthood and pro-abortion and all of this. But I did not realize until today just how unhinged a lot of these people really are. Shout out to the guy on TikTok who said that if this stands as the law of the land, he's going to get a vasectomy. More power to you, bud. Just saying. If you don't want kids, there are ways to not have kids. Okay? You don't have to end their lives. So, let's start out by looking at a technical thing here. Roe versus Wade did not observe whether or not life or death was involved. What they did was use medical privacy and create something that isn't even really in the Constitution of the United States as a means to end the lives of babies. Okay? As a matter of fact, being somewhat of a constitutional scholar myself, and let's see, I think I wrote some notes down in here with regard to that. Okay. Where was? Oh, here it is. Okay. Point of fact, there is nothing in the Constitution of the United States that guarantees the right to privacy. Okay? It's not in there. Read it. I'd loan you my pocket version, but I still use that. Also, there is nothing in there specifically about the right to live, the right to life. People go, what? Yeah, there is. There's that preamble. You're thinking about a different preamble. The preamble of the Constitution is "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." That's the preamble you should be thinking about. It says nothing in there about life. However, this is where you have to know your history along with your Constitution. Okay? There is nothing written specifically within the Constitution of the United States about the right to life. And there is a reason for that. One of the big fights when the Congress sat down to, since when the framers of the Constitution sat down to make the framework for the Constitution. Basically, the bulk of the Constitution outlines the limitations of the government. How the government goes about its business, the checks and balances, the three branches, the two houses of Congress, the fact that the states are in control of the voting process. This prohibits the federal government from muddying the waters, or it's supposed to. All that's in the Constitution. There were people who thought, wow, we got to have a Bill of Rights. We got to spell it out, clear terms, that people have the freedom to worship as they please. We have to have the freedom of speech and public expression. We have to have this so that people can dissent and they can confirm and they can argue their point, regardless of how ridiculous that point is or how accurate that point is. The truth will the truth will eventually be uncovered. It's kind of like erosion. You can tell a lie and cover it up with dirt. Sooner or later, the wind and the water are going to uncover it. Sooner or later, with free speech, people who lie are going to be exposed. So free speech was important enough to warrant number one in the Bill of Rights. And there was a Bill of Rights. 10 amendments to the original Constitution that were passed immediately. And these 10 amendments were things that the founders thought, this is so important. We need to spell this out because they were afraid. There were those then who wouldn't dream of arming their citizenry. Can you imagine a king saying, well, let's all be armed? That way, if I do something tyrannical and they call me on it and I don't back down a little bit, they can come take me out. No, I'm not going to do that. We did that. Other parts of it, like, hey, you have the right to a fair trial? Yeah, that's in the Constitution. You have a right to be tried by a jury or your peers. You have the right to confront your accuser. All of these things. You don't have to quarter soldiers in your home. All of these things are in there. What they didn't put in there was you have the right to live. Now, consider for a moment that when the Constitution was written, that wasn't even considered questionable. There was no question whatsoever. As long as you did not kill someone, commit a massive act of treason, as long as you didn't commit a heinous crime, your life was not forfeit. So everybody was going to live. The Constitution was basically written to protect the liberties that were discussed in the Declaration of Independence. That's where you get the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It wasn't in the Constitution, it was in the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution was written to support the ideas in the Declaration of Independence. So, now, having said that, we come to the 20th century. Got a few numbers here. Okay? Now, we get to the 20th century and we come across some really bad people here. Really bad dudes. Let's see. Nicolas Maduro. For all intents and purposes, he is the dictator of Venezuela. And to date, according to RFI.fr, www.rfi.fr, Maduro has basically killed 7,000 of his own people. Fidel Castro took out 11,000 of his people. Pol Pot took the lives of 3 million of his people. Adolf Hitler killed 7 million innocent people in concentration camps. Joseph Stalin, 23 million Soviet citizens. And that's not counting the people that died as a result of World War II. Those are just the ones that he got rid of because they were inconvenient to him and his regime. Chairman Mao Zedong, 45 million Chinese. And the list goes on. I mean, it's quite the list. You've got the Ayatollah Khomeini, Benito Mussolini, Ho Chi Minh, Kim Jong-il, and I don't have the numbers in front of me here for how many innocent civilians died by their hand. But I do have one other one here from Guttmacher Institute, which is the anybody who's ever researched this, that is the main source of information. I tried looking at other sources, by the way. None of them, they take bits and pieces. For example, the New York Times had a piece where they were saying, well, in 2018, 693,000 babies were aborted. But very seldom do you see anybody who will take all of those different years from 1973 on up and add them together. From 1973 to 2017, I don't have the last 5 years figures added in here, but from 1973 to 2017, 63.5 million with an M. 63.5 million innocent Americans have died by abortion. 63.5. Where does that put us in the world of Chairman Mao and Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler and all the rest of these evil dictators? Wow. That's why this is going to take more than 15 minutes, people. I'm sorry, but it is. I can't do this in 15 minutes. I did see Joe Biden's speech today, and it was very telling. Okay, very telling. And it not only tells about his, well, it doesn't really tell of his personal feelings, because in 1973 he said something completely and totally different. But he was pandering to a different crowd. So, and you know, nobody knows exactly what goes on in Joe's mind these days. Excuse me. But Biden's speech was very telling about the views of his handlers and the far left. So some of these comments will take as they're spoken, but we'll look at the broader context later. So, one of the ones that really, really, really stuck out to me, if I may paraphrase, is the one where only a family in the privacy of their own home can decide on the fate of a child, of the child's life. Woman in the privacy of her own home is the only one that's truly allowed to decide the fate of a child that, in all intents and purposes, her and a male partner have created. Okay. That one hit me really hard because it's wrong on so many levels. I mean, I'm just going to pick a couple of the biggest ones because it boggles the mind on how wrong this thinking is. Okay. First, okay, so you've got the pro-abortion crowd and the pro-life crowd, and they like to call themselves pro-choice. It's my right to choose what I do with my body. I don't disagree. It is your right to choose what to do with your body. The question is it your right to choose what to do with another person's body? And you're saying, oh, no, of course not. Well, that's what we're talking about here, another person's body. You have a child in you, in your body. And that child is, like all children, helpless. They rely on their mother more than their father at this stage in life, but their mother for protection from everything. So you can't say that it's just my body because there's another body in there, another human being, a baby. So that part gets blown out of the water there. Check the science, folks. For those of you who think that science is all important, there's some science there. Okay? That's the contradictions here are crazy. There are a lot of contradictions. Okay. Here was back to what Joe said. Biden. Okay, he said that abortion can only be decided by a family in their own home. To put it in broader context, let's say you have a neighbor that's inconvenient. I'm sure we've all had them. Neighbors who we don't necessarily get along with, don't see eye to eye with, neighbors that are rude, neighbors that are annoying, aggravating. I know we've had them. I have. I'm pretty sure everybody else that's ever lived with a neighbor has had a neighbor they find rude or annoying or aggravating. And one of the reasons I left the big city was because when I lived in the city, I had a lot of rude neighbors. At no point in time did it ever occur to me that I could or would take their life. They were rude. They were obnoxious. They were annoying. I left. I went somewhere else. I can live my whole life without rude, obnoxious, annoying neighbors. So, but to put this in a bigger term here, okay? So you have rude, obnoxious, annoying neighbor, and you decide you don't want to live next to this guy anymore. He's aggravating. He's inconsiderate. He's just inconvenient to have around. So you sit down and you're talking with your wife, and you go back and forth, and you're like, he's obnoxious, and she's like, yes, I know. Wish we didn't have to live next to him. Well, why don't we do something about it? Oh, hey, that's an idea. So pretty soon a plot gets hatched. And the next thing you know, the neighbor winds up dead. Now, in our current world, the police are going to investigate, and they're going to say, well, we got some evidence here that maybe you guys had something to do with this. So we're going to have to take you in, and we're going to present this evidence to the DA, and I think you're in a lot of trouble. But by Joe Biden's compass, no, you can't do that. These people hatched this plot in the privacy of their own home. And what takes place in the privacy of their own home is okay. So if a woman can decide in the privacy of her own home that she doesn't want this baby that she helped conceive, and she goes to an abortion doctor and they take its life, no harm, no foul. If you're ever wondering why, and this was the part that when I was in 1973 that I said was coming down the pike. If you ever wonder why we have such a crime problem, why we have people that are obnoxiously rude to each other, why we have so much crime and so much murder and so much assault, and why we have so many riots, and why people, particularly on the left, are always resorting to violence rather than open conversation, rather than deep thinking, rather than considering the science, as it were. It comes back to this. We have committed acts of violence against innocent children since 1973, and 63.5 million of them have died as a result of this. That's fact. You can look it up. You can dig into it all you want. The facts are there. And we here lately we've had under the administration of Barack Obama, not so much under not as often under President Trump, and now under Joe Biden, it's bounced back quite fashionably. But all these mass school shootings, and really it's more about people's decision not to accept the sanctity of life, a decision that's been drilled into them for almost 50 years, as opposed to some problem with the Second Amendment, which has been around since the beginning of the Republic. Violence begets violence. Whether you have a gun or not, violence begets violence. 63 million children have died And a gun was not used in any of those assaults. Not one. So I think that's an important point to take away from this. Of all of the violence, how many of these children, how many of these adults were children during 1970s? How many of them said, wow, if it weren't for good luck, I might have been one of those 63 million kids? How many of them grew up thinking that life really isn't that sanctified if so many people can die by violence? And what do we get? We get, as I was watching Joe Biden speak, and then it went off to Nancy Pelosi, and they talked to Maxine Waters, to name a couple. There were more in the same vein, but Pelosi and Waters were both calling for violence to support the stance of abortion rights activists. We're not going to discuss it. We're not going to sit down and talk about it. We're going right to the violence. Really? How many pro-lifers have been violent? How many pro-lifers have burned down something? There have been a couple of occasions where pro-lifers have threatened abortion doctors. I will say that. But nothing near like what we're seeing now. And the pro-abortion crowd continually goes to violence. I guess once you're indoctrinated into the world of violence, you continue to be violent. I don't know. But I do know this. You know, I've been looking at these statistics and stuff today. And I probably used the word violence enough that I don't know if YouTube's going to take this or not. I don't condone violence. I don't adhere to violence. I don't believe in violence. I believe in open discussion. I believe that if we have a problem, we need to talk it out. We need to find a solution that works for everyone. But it's right there in front of you. If you resort to violence as a result of the court saying, yes, life deserves respect, and we haven't been very good stewards of that ideology. If your only thought is to commit an act of violence, all I can say is you have been in a violent mode too long. It should not be about violence. We should take this as an opportunity to come together and have some healing. And maybe say a prayer for the 63.5 million who are no longer with us because of the violence. I'm John Robinson, and this extra long Thoughts from Flyover Country segment has come to a close. And I really hope that we can sit down and start to view things and say farewell to the violence. It's not necessary. Use your brain. Think outside that box. That's today's thought from Flyover Country.